Hello and welcome to Knitting with Jean. Last week I showed you how to decrease, and this week I'm going to show you how to increase. So enjoy! Welcome to Knitting with Jean. Last week we did decreases and I showed you how to just simply knit two together. I showed you how to knit one, slip one, knit one and pass the slip stitch over to decrease. I showed you how to decrease by knitting two together through the back of the loops, and I showed you how it makes a nice edge whenever you're decreasing. Let's begin. I'm going to show you how to do a simple increase, which is knit a stitch and then the next stitch you knit into it as normal, but you don't let it off the needle, and you knit into it again, and that changes one stitch into two, and that's known as increasing. And you'll use increasing on something like the sleeve of this jumper, where you start off with a small number of stitches, but you want it to be a little bit wider as it gets near the top. So you increase every so often all the way up the sleeve, and it becomes this wide to this wide. Let's take a closer look at that stitch. You're increasing at the beginning of the row. You would normally knit your first stitch, and then if you're going to increase in this stitch, you knit the first part as usual, but you don't let it go off the needle, and then you put your needle to the back and you increase and you knit it again, and that changes one stitch into two, just like magic. And then you can knit to the end of your row. I'm going to show you another way of increasing, which is sometimes used when you need to increase in the middle of a row and not at an edge. So, as I'm going to do it in the middle of this row, I'll knit the first 4 stitches here, and then I come here and there's a little loop here between the 2 stitches, and I'm going to put my needle under that loop and push it onto the left hand needle, and then I'm going to knit that loop, and then I'm going to knit the next stitches, and that'll have increased the stitches on my row in the middle. Let's take a closer look at how I did that. I'm going to knit several stitches, because you would normally use this type of increase when you're doing it in the middle of a row or several times along a row. So I've knitted the stitches, I hold the 2 needles like that, and as you can see there's a little loop here. I've just put my needle under it. I'm going to lift it up and put it onto my left hand needle, and then I'm going to knit it. And that makes an extra stitch on your row. I want to show you something about when you're doing this type of increase, because in case it worries you, I'm using quite chunky wool and needles here so that you can see it more easily. You would probably only use this type of increase on finer wool and finer needles, but it does leave a little hole in your work like that. It's not a mistake, it's part of the stitches, and sometimes it can actually form part of your pattern and become part of the overall work. But it's just I thought I should show you that in case you think, oh my goodness, I must have dropped a stitch or I've done something wrong. So something that you will be asked to do in a pattern is cast on some extra stitches at the beginning of a row. And the way you do that is you knit into your first stitch, and then you put it back on there, and then you knit into it again and you put it back on there. You knit into it again and you put it back on there, and that's created 3 more stitches at the beginning. And you can do that as many times as your pattern suggests, and then when you've got them on, you just knit them as usual, and you've suddenly got 3 more stitches. Let's take a closer look at that. Right, so if you want to increase stitches at the beginning of your row, you do it like this. You knit into it and you put it back on your needle. See? And then you can just knit those stitches as if they were normal stitches. Oops, got a bit slippy fingers today. And they become part of your garment. And you see the shape that that makes. I think that's enough for today. So keep practicing what I've showed you. And next week I'm going to show you how to read patterns that you would buy in a wool shop or see in a magazine, and that'll be quite interesting. Goodbye from Knitting with Jean.